What happens when an elderly woman, disrespected by a coffee shop, returns the next day with a plan that no one saw coming? Stay tuned for a story of dignity, determination, and ultimate transformation. In a modest apartment building tucked away in New York's working-class district, Maggie Harper lived her quiet life with simple grace. At 65, she had grown accustomed to the sounds of the city, the early morning traffic, children playing in the streets, and the constant hum of life outside her small window. She was just more comfortable with that than with the sadness her workspace equipment had managed to take on daily. Her home was a testament to careful living. Everything had its place: the well-worn armchair by the window, stacks of borrowed library books on the coffee table, and a collection of small treasures gathered over the years. Each morning, Maggie would sit in her favorite chair, watching the sunrise while sipping tea from her former students at the kindergarten where she had taught for 30 years. "Another beautiful morning," she would often whisper to herself, finding joy in these peaceful moments. Living on a teacher's pension meant being careful with money, but Maggie had mastered the art of making every dollar count. She kept a small jar on her kitchen counter, dropping in spare change whenever she could. Just a few coins each day, she would remind herself with a gentle smile. They add up to something special eventually. Life with grace, as Ames had described it, which she tried to remember. She said sadly. These saved coins were her way of treating herself on special occasions. Sometimes it meant buying fresh flowers for her windowsill, other times a new book or a warm scarf for winter. Maggie believed that life's smallest pleasures were often the most meaningful. Her neighbors often saw her tending to the small plant box outside her window, adding touches of color to their gray surroundings. "Miss Maggie," they would call out, "your flowers make our whole street look prettier." She would wave back, her face brightening at their kind words. Though she lived alone, Maggie never felt lonely. She had learned that happiness didn't require grand gestures or expensive things. It was found in the small moments of joy she created for herself. Today was Maggie's birthday, and she had been saving for this special treat for months. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation as she held the small envelope containing her carefully saved money. Inside were exactly enough dollars for a mocha from Starry Brew, the most elegant coffee shop in the neighborhood. "Today's the day," Maggie whispered to herself, touching the envelope in her coat pocket. "A birthday treat from me to me." Starry Brew stood proudly on the corner of Fifth Avenue, its modern glass facade gleaming in the morning sun. Through the large windows, Maggie could see sleek leather chairs and polished marble tables. The aroma of premium coffee drifted out whenever the door opened, making her mouth water with anticipation. A stream of well-dressed customers flowed in and out of the shop. Men in expensive suits carried briefcases and checked their gold watches. Women with designer handbags chatted on their phones while waiting for their drinks. Luxury cars regularly pulled up to the curb, their owners stepping out for their morning coffee fix. "Did you hear?" Maggie overheard a passerby say. "The CEO of Thompson Industries comes here every morning for his espresso. They say even that famous movie actress was here last week," she continued. "I doubt it they'll catch her in the crossfire," Maggie said. Maggie had walked past Starry Brew many times, always dreaming of trying their famous mocha. She'd heard wonderful things about it from her neighbor who worked in a nearby office building. "The chocolate they use is imported from Switzerland," her neighbor had told her, "and they top each drink with hand-whipped cream and a sprinkle of gold dust." Standing across the street, Maggie watched as baristas in crisp black aprons served drinks on silver trays. The shop's reputation for luxury and excellence had made it the go-to place for New York's elite. But today, Maggie reminded herself she too would be a customer at Starry Brew. Taking a deep breath, Maggie pulled her old brown coat closer around her shoulders and pushed open the heavy glass door of Starry Brew. The soft chime of bells announced her entrance, drawing curious glances from the fashionable crowd inside. Her well-worn shoes made quiet sounds against the polished marble floor as she stepped in. The interior was even more impressive up close. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over leather armchairs and sleek metal tables. The air was rich with the scent of premium coffee and freshly baked pastries. Soft jazz music played in the background, mixing with the gentle murmur of conversations. A group of businesswomen at a nearby table paused their discussion to look at Maggie. Their designer outfits and perfectly styled hair made her increasingly aware of her faded scarf and outdated handbag. She caught snippets of their whispered comments. "Is she lost?" one woman murmured behind her coffee cup. "Perhaps she's looking for the convenience store down the street," another replied with a slight smirk. One of the Aurors gathered her thoughts. Maggie's cheeks flushed warm with embarrassment, but she held her head high. At the counter ahead, customers in expensive suits ordered complicated drinks with confident voices. Their watches gleamed under the artistic lighting, and their phones buzzed with important messages. "Excuse me," Maggie said softly to a young man who bumped into her without noticing. He barely glanced her way before returning to his phone conversation. She felt like a sparrow that had wandered into a peacock's garden. Everything around her spoke of luxury and privilege, from the artwork on the walls to the marble-topped tables. Even the napkins looked expensive, embossed with the cafe's elegant logo in gold. Yet Maggie reminded herself that she had saved for this moment. "I deserve to be here too," she whispered to herself, clutching her envelope of saved money. Everyone deserves a birthday treat. Hour after hour passed, and she put her package of crackers into her pocket. The line at Starry Brew moved slowly as baristas crafted each elaborate drink with precision. Maggie stood quietly in line, watching as people ahead of her ordered their customized beverages. Her hands clasped her small purse, fingers gently touching the envelope inside that held her birthday money. Behind the counter, Lucas, the head barista, noticed Maggie in line. His tall figure straightened as he surveyed her worn clothing with clear disdain. He leaned towards his coworker, keeping his voice low but loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "Look what just walked in," he whispered, nodding towards Maggie. "She doesn't belong here. This isn't some cheap diner." Laura returned the greeting. His coworker glanced at Maggie and stifled a laugh. Lucas continued preparing drinks, but his eyes kept returning to Maggie with obvious disapproval. Each time he handed a drink to a well-dressed customer, his smile was warm and professional. Yet when his gaze fell on Maggie, his expression turned cold. "Next fancy drink order coming up," Lucas called out cheerfully, ignoring Maggie completely as she moved forward in line. A young woman in a business suit cut in front of Maggie, barely acknowledging her presence. Lucas beamed at the newcomer. "Good morning, Miss Thompson. The usual vanilla latte?" "Ah." Maggie stepped back quietly, allowing the interruption without complaint. She watched as Lucas crafted the woman's drink with flourishing movements, adding an extra sprinkle of cinnamon with a practiced gesture. "She's probably just here to warm up," Lucas muttered to another coworker, casting another dismissive glance at Maggie. "I bet she can't even afford a plain coffee." Despite their unkind words, Maggie remained in line, her patience unwavering. She had waited months for this treat. She could wait a few more minutes. Exercise. Finally reaching the counter, Maggie looked up at Lucas with a gentle smile. Her voice was soft but clear as she placed her order. "1 mocha, please." Her lips tightened, and she focused on pouring her coffee. Lucas raised his eyebrows, exchanging glances with his coworker. His lips curled into a subtle smirk as he leaned forward on the marble counter. "A mocha? Are you aware of our prices, ma'am? This isn't your regular corner shop coffee." Maggie nodded, reaching for her envelope. "Yes." I know the price. I've been saving for this. It's $15, Lucas said loudly, emphasizing each word. That's just for a regular size. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer something more basic? Several customers turned to watch the exchange. Maggie's cheeks flushed pink, but she stood her ground. I have enough money, she said, opening her envelope to show the carefully saved bills inside. Lucas looked at the worn envelope with obvious disgust. I'm sorry, but we don't accept cash payments for large amounts. It's against our policy. His voice carried a note of mock regret. Finally, the man said, But I've been saving these bills specially, Maggie explained, her voice trembling slightly. It's my birthday today. Josh. How convenient, Lucas replied with a cold smile. Look, ma'am, this is a premium establishment. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone who doesn't meet our standards. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the diner down the street? His words hung in the air like sharp icicles. Maggie stood frozen, the envelope clutched tightly in her aging hands. The birthday treat she had dreamed of for months was slipping away, dissolved by cruel words and colder hearts. Lucas leaned over to his coworker, speaking loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. Can you believe it? She probably spent months collecting coins just to come here. His mocking laughter echoed through the cafe. A group of business people at the counter snickered, their expensive watches glinting as they turned to stare at Maggie. A woman in a designer suit whispered to her companion, not bothering to lower her voice. How embarrassing. Some people just don't know their place. Maybe she thought this was a charity cafe, Lucas continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. We serve premium coffee here, not handouts. More laughter rippled through the crowd. Maggie felt every chuckle like a physical blow, each smirk and whispered comment piercing her dignity. Her hands trembled as she carefully folded the envelope containing her savings, tucking it back into her worn purse. The birthday treat she had dreamed of had turned into a nightmare of humiliation. Yet Maggie straightened her shoulders, determined not to let them see her cry. Her mother had always taught her that true dignity comes from how you handle unkindness. Thank you for your time, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the hurt in her heart. She turned toward the door, her old shoes silent against the polished floor. Behind her, she could still hear Lucas's voice. Don't forget to try the diner down the street. I hear they accept pocket change there. Fresh laughter followed Maggie as she pushed open the heavy glass door. The morning sun still shone brightly outside, but somehow it felt colder now. A single tear rolled down her cheek as she walked away from Starry Brew, her birthday dream shattered by cruel words and colder hearts. In the corner of the coffee shop, Mia watched the scene unfold with growing discomfort. Her hands clenched her apron as Lucas's cruel words filled the air. As the newest employee, she had stayed quiet, but her heart ached, seeing Maggie's dignity being stripped away so callously. This isn't right, Mia whispered to herself, watching Maggie's retreating figure through the window. During her break, she asked other staff members about the elderly woman's routine, learning that Maggie often walked in the nearby park. When her shift ended at 6 p.m., Mia carefully prepared a special mocha, adding extra whipped cream and a sprinkle of cinnamon, the way she'd noticed regular customers liked it. She placed it in a thermal cup, hoping it would stay warm. The park was quiet in the evening light. Mia spotted Maggie sitting alone on a bench, reading a worn paperback book. Taking a deep breath, she approached slowly. Maggie slid her hand out toward her, and Mia took it. Welcome home. Excuse me, Mrs. Maggie. Mia's voice was gentle. I work at Starry Brew. I saw what happened this morning. Maggie looked up, surprise crossing her face. Mia sat down beside her, offering the cup with both hands. Maggie served it to them. I brought you the mocha you wanted. It's on me, Mia said softly. I'm so sorry for how you were treated. What Lucas did was cruel and wrong. Maggie's eyes moistened as she accepted the cup. You didn't have to do this, dear. But I wanted to, Mia replied, her voice firm. No one deserves to be treated that way, especially not on their birthday. What happened today doesn't reflect who you are, it reflects who they are. A small smile touched Maggie's lips as she took a sip of the mocha. Thank you, dear. This means more than just the coffee. He added extra whipped cream and chocolate drizzle, Mia explained, watching Maggie take another sip of the mocha. That's how I make it for my grandmother. She says it makes it taste like a warm hug. Maggie held the cup with both hands, savoring its warmth. The evening breeze rustled through the park trees as Mia continued speaking. I've only been working at Starry Brew for 2 weeks, she said softly. But what I saw today, the way Lucas treated you, it goes against everything I believe in. A coffee shop should be a place where everyone feels welcome, and I believe we can all accomplish this together. If you join me, we can do anything. Maggie's eyes glistened with emotion. You're a kind soul, dear. Not many would care about an old woman's hurt feelings. She smiled. Everyone deserves respect, Mia replied firmly. Lucas thinks fancy clothes and expensive watches make people worthy of kindness. He couldn't be more wrong. Emily's jaw twisted in horror. A gentle smile spread across Maggie's face, transforming her entire expression. The hurt from earlier seemed to fade a little as she looked at the young woman beside her. Sorry. Thank you, Mia, she said warmly. This isn't just about the coffee. Your kindness has made my birthday special after all. Mia felt her own eyes growing misty. I wish I could do more. It's not fair that some people think they can judge others based on appearances. Excuse the use of the phrase, but poor suffering people take comfort in being able to get things done. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft colors. Sometimes, Mia realized, the smallest acts of kindness could heal the deepest wounds. And sometimes, a simple cup of coffee could mean so much more than just a drink. As Maggie walked home that evening, her heart felt lighter than it had all day. Mia's kindness had done more than just salvage her birthday. It had awakened something deep within her. The mocha cup, now empty, still felt warm in her hands, like a reminder that goodness existed even in unexpected places. Make kind heart can make all the difference, she whispered to herself, remembering Mia's sincere smile and gentle words. Sitting in her favorite chair by the window, Maggie reflected on the day's events. The humiliation at Starry Brew still stung, but it no longer felt like the end of the story. Instead, it felt like a beginning. Perhaps, she thought, watching the city lights twinkle outside, this happened for a reason. Maybe it's time to stand up not just for myself, but for others who've been treated the same way. The seed of an idea began to take root in her mind. If one young barista could show such compassion, imagine what could be accomplished with a whole coffee shop built on kindness and respect. Maggie smiled, feeling a new sense of purpose stirring in her heart. That night, sitting in her dimly lit apartment, memories flooded Maggie's mind. She remembered the boutique where a saleswoman had refused to show her dresses, claiming they were too expensive. The restaurant host who had seated her near the kitchen, far from other diners. The real estate agent who wouldn't even show her apartments in better neighborhoods. Ma'am, these properties might be out of your range, they would say, their polite words barely masking their judgment. Each memory carried the same sting of humiliation she'd felt at Starry Brew. But now, instead of making her shrink away, these memories fueled her determination for change. Suddenly, an image of Vincent Cole appeared in her thoughts. Her old friend from the community center, now a retired lawyer, had always fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. His kind eyes and sharp mind had helped many people over the years. Vincent would know what to do, Maggie murmured, reaching for her phone. She remembered how he'd handled the case of the elderly man who'd been cheated out of his savings. Vincent's connections in the business world had helped resolve that situation swiftly. Despite his retirement, Vincent remained active in the community, using his network of business contacts to support various social causes. His voice still carried weight in many circles. Maggie looked at the clock. 9:30 p.m. Not too late to make a call to an old friend. She picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over Vincent's number. Perhaps it was time to turn her pain into purpose, and who better to help her than Vincent? The next morning, Maggie found herself walking through the local park, her mind still heavy with yesterday's events. She spotted Vincent, her old friend, sitting on his usual bench feeding pigeons. His kind face and familiar brown coat were a welcome sight. "Vincent," Maggie called softly, approaching the bench. "Do you have a moment?" Vincent looked up, his gentle eyes crinkling with concern as he noticed her troubled expression. "Of course, Maggie. What's bothering you?" Sitting beside him, Maggie began sharing her story. Her voice trembled slightly as she described the humiliation at Starry Brew. Vincent listened intently, his hands gripping his wooden cane tighter as she recounted Lucas's cruel words. "They made me feel worthless," Maggie whispered, dabbing at her eyes with her worn handkerchief. "All because I didn't look like their usual customers." Vincent shook his head slowly, his expression thoughtful. "You know, Maggie, this isn't just about a cup of coffee. It's about dignity and respect." "What can I do?" Maggie asked, her shoulders slumped. "I'm just one old woman." Vincent turned to face her, his eyes bright with wisdom. "Sometimes, Maggie, the greatest changes start with one person standing up. Think about it. How many others have faced the same treatment? How many walked away feeling broken, just like you did?" His words stirred something in Maggie's heart. She thought about Mia's kindness, how one small act had given her hope. "You have more strength than you realize," Vincent continued gently. "Why not use this experience to make a difference? Not just for yourself, but for everyone who's ever been judged by their appearance." Maggie sat straighter, a new light dawning in her eyes. "You're right, Vincent. Maybe this isn't just about me anymore." "That's the spirit," Vincent smiled warmly. "Sometimes life's greatest hurts can lead to the most meaningful changes. You just need to be brave enough to take the first step." The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the park. In Maggie's heart, Vincent's words had planted a seed of purpose that would soon grow into something remarkable. A few days later, Vincent led Maggie into the lobby of a modern office building downtown. The marble floors gleamed beneath their feet as they made their way to the elevator. Maggie clutched her small handbag nervously, her heart fluttering. "If we go this way," Vincent offered as they climbed the stairs to the 24th floor. "They'll come for us." "Don't worry," Vincent assured her softly. "Jonathan is different from other investors. He cares about people, not just profits." They were welcomed into a warm, sunlit office where Jonathan Clark sat behind a simple desk. Despite his expensive suit, his gentle smile immediately put Maggie at ease. "So, Vincent tells me you have an interesting proposal," Jonathan said, gesturing for them to sit. His kind eyes reminded Maggie of her late husband. Taking a deep breath, Maggie began sharing her story. Her voice grew stronger as she described her experience at Starry Brew, the humiliation she felt, and Mia's act of kindness. "It's not just about coffee," Maggie explained, her eyes bright with passion. "It's about creating a place where everyone feels welcome, regardless of how they look or what they wear." Jonathan leaned forward, genuinely interested. "What exactly do you envision?" "A coffee shop where kindness matters more than status," Maggie replied. "Where a teacher's pension is just as valuable as a CEO's credit card. Where people like Mia can teach others about respect and dignity." "And you want to transform Starry Brew into this place?" Jonathan asked, making notes in his small notebook. Maggie nodded firmly. "Everyone deserves to feel valued, Mr. Clark. A cup of coffee shouldn't come with a side of humiliation." Jonathan sat back, a warm smile spreading across his face. "You know, Mrs. Harper, I've heard many business proposals in this office, but none quite like yours." He paused, studying her determined expression. "Most people want to make money. You want to make a difference." "Can it be done?" Maggie asked hopefully. Jonathan exchanged glances with Vincent before turning back to Maggie. "With the right support and your vision for change, I believe it can. Let's make this happen." In that moment, Maggie's dream began to feel real. A simple cup of coffee had sparked a mission to change not just a cafe, but the way people treated each other. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Jonathan's office as he finished reviewing Maggie's proposal. He set down his notebook and looked at her with newfound respect in his eyes. "Mrs. Harper," he said warmly, "your story has touched my heart. But more than that, your vision for change is exactly what this community needs." Mrs. Harper eyed the food still left on the table. Without allowing Miss Fisher to refill it, she took a slice of the croissant pie and considered it before offering it to Vin. "Mrs. Harper," he said. Maggie sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, hardly daring to hope. Jonathan stood and walked to his window, looking out at the city below. "You know, I've funded many businesses," he continued thoughtfully, "but none with the potential to change lives quite like this. I want to help make your dream a reality." Vincent beamed from his chair while Maggie's eyes filled with tears of joy. Jonathan returned to his desk and pressed a button on his phone. More color came into her cheeks. "Sarah, please bring in the preliminary investment papers," he called to his assistant. Turning to Maggie, he smiled. "I'll provide the financial backing you need to purchase Starry Brew." "You mean?" Maggie's voice trembled with emotion. "Use?" Jonathan nodded. "With my investment and Vincent's legal expertise, we can make this happen. The coffee shop will be yours to transform." Over the next hour, they discussed details. Vincent offered to handle all legal aspects of the purchase, while Jonathan outlined the financial support he would provide. "We'll keep your identity confidential during the purchase," Vincent explained, his eyes twinkling. "That way you can observe the staff in their natural state before making changes." Maggie touched the worn envelope in her purse, the one that had once held her birthday savings. Now it would hold the keys to something much bigger. In the next chapter, Freezing to Death, the editor continued. "I don't know how to thank you both," she whispered, her voice full of gratitude. Ire shot between the wires. Jonathan shook his head gently. "Your vision of kindness and respect is thanks enough. Sometimes the best investments aren't about money at all." As they left the office that evening, Maggie felt lighter than air. Her dream of creating a place where everyone would feel welcome was no longer just a dream. It was becoming reality. In the sleek conference room of a downtown law firm, Vincent sat across from the current owner of Starry Brew. His polished wooden cane rested against the table as he spread out the necessary documents. The morning light filtered through large windows, casting a professional glow over the proceedings. "Our client is very interested in acquiring Starry Brew," Vincent stated calmly, his years of legal experience evident in his measured tone. "We understand your company is looking to sell some of its premium locations." The owner, a sharply dressed businessman, nodded. "Yes, we're streamlining our operations. Starry Brew has been profitable, but we're focusing on other ventures." Vincent skillfully guided the conversation, never revealing Maggie's identity. His gentle demeanor masked a shrewd negotiator's mind as he presented the offer. "We're prepared to make a fair purchase," he explained, sliding across a document with the proposed terms. The transition would be smooth, with minimal disruption to daily operations. In a quiet corner cafe nearby, Maggie waited anxiously, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She watched the clock tick by, wondering how the negotiations were progressing. Back in the conference room, Vincent's expertise showed as he addressed each concern with patient wisdom. His preparation was thorough, leaving no detail unexplored. "Your client seems very serious about this purchase," the owner remarked, reviewing the papers. Vincent smiled warmly. Indeed, they see great potential in Starry Brew's future. The morning stretched into afternoon as they worked through the details. Finally, the owner picked up his pen. "Everything appears to be in order," he said, signing the final documents. "Starry Brew will be in good hands." Vincent gathered the papers carefully, his heart light with success. He found Maggie still waiting in the cafe, her face brightening at his approach. "It's done," he said softly, patting her hand. "Starry Brew is yours now." Maggie's eyes filled with happy tears. Her dream of creating a welcoming place for everyone was one step closer to reality. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow through Maggie's window as she held the ownership papers in her trembling hands. Her small apartment felt different somehow, filled with possibility and promise. The official document bearing her name as the new owner of Starry Brew seemed almost surreal. "It's really happening," she whispered to herself, carefully placing the papers in her drawer. Her heart fluttered with excitement, but her mind remained clear and focused. Vincent sat in her worn armchair, sipping tea from her favorite blue mug. "Remember, Maggie, no one at the shop knows about the change in ownership yet." Maggie nodded thoughtfully. "I want to see how they truly behave, not how they act for a new owner." "Wise decision," Vincent smiled. "Sometimes the best way to understand people is to observe them when they think no one's watching." Wise decision. Later that afternoon, Maggie walked past Starry Brew, her steps slower and more deliberate than before. Through the window, she could see Lucas still treating customers with his usual selective courtesy. Warm smiles for the well-dressed, cold shoulders for the rest. "My shop now," she thought, watching a young student being rushed through his order, but not yet time to show my hand. Inside, the familiar sounds of coffee grinding and casual chatter filled the air. Maggie stood across the street, taking mental notes of how different customers were treated. She pulled out a notebook and paged through the pages to add and subtract. "Patience," she reminded herself, remembering Vincent's advice. "Real change needs careful planning." That evening, sitting in her favorite chair, Maggie wrote in her small notebook, Day 1 of observation. Some hearts need more than just new ownership to change. They need to learn empathy. She looked out at the city lights, her reflection in the window showing not just an elderly woman, but a determined owner with a mission. The keys to Starry Brew sat on her table, waiting for the right moment to unlock not just a door, but a new chapter of change. The next morning, Maggie returned to Starry Brew wearing her simple brown coat and worn scarf. The familiar bell chimed as she pushed open the heavy glass door. Inside, the aroma of premium coffee filled the air, mixing with soft jazz music. Lucas stood behind the counter, his tall figure stiffening as he spotted her. His lips curled into a familiar smirk as he leaned toward his coworker. "Look who's back," he whispered loudly. "Seems she didn't learn her lesson last time." Maggie approached the counter quietly, her heart steady despite Lucas's cold stare. The morning rush had slowed, leaving only a few customers scattered around the marble tables. "Good morning," she said softly. "I'd like to order a mocha, please." Lucas's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "Oh, you again? Did you forget what happened on your birthday?" His voice dripped with sarcasm. "I have money to pay," Maggie replied calmly, reaching into her purse. "Listen," Lucas said, crossing his arms. I thought I made it clear last time. This isn't the place for you." He gestured dismissively toward the door. "There's a diner down the street that's more suitable for your budget." A few customers glanced their way, some smirking behind their expensive cups. Maggie stood her ground, observing every detail of Lucas's behavior. "Is there a problem with serving me?" she asked quietly. "The problem," Lucas replied with exaggerated patience, "is that we have standards here. We cater to a certain class of customers." He looked pointedly at her worn clothing. Maggie nodded slowly, taking in every word, every gesture. As the owner, she could have revealed herself right then, but she knew the time wasn't right. Instead, she turned and walked toward the door, carefully noting how Lucas's laughter followed her out. "Some people never learned," she heard him say to another customer, but at least she left quickly this time. She walked outside. Maggie touched the keys to the cafe in her pocket. Soon, she thought, very soon, things would change. Throughout the week, Maggie observed Starry Brew from different vantage points. She noticed how most staff members followed Lucas's example, treating modestly dressed customers with barely considered disdain. Only Mia remained consistently kind to everyone. One morning, an elderly man in worn clothes asked for a simple coffee. The barista behind the counter barely looked at him as she pushed his drink across the counter. Minutes later, she served a businessman with a bright smile and detailed explanation of their coffee beans. "We need more evidence," Maggie told Vincent during their evening meeting. "Would you and Jonathan help me test them?" Vincent nodded, his eyes twinkling. "A little undercover work? I'd be happy to assist." The next day, Vincent entered Starry Brew wearing old jeans and a faded jacket, his usual polished appearance replaced by carefully chosen, shabby clothes. He approached the counter, leaning on his wooden cane. "Good morning," he said pleasantly. "Could I see your menu?" The barista glanced at his clothing and sighed dramatically. The prices are clearly displayed above. Basic coffee starts at $5. "And that special mocha everyone talks about?" Vincent inquired. "That's $15, she replied curtly. "Maybe too expensive for you." Later that afternoon, Jonathan visited wearing similar modest attire. Despite his attempt to order, staff members kept serving other customers ahead of him. When he finally reached the counter, Lucas treated him with obvious contempt. "The regular coffee might be more appropriate for your budget," Lucas suggested with a smirk. That evening, Maggie reviewed her notes with Vincent and Jonathan. The evidence was clear. Most staff members consistently discriminated against customers based on appearance. "Only Mia treats everyone with respect," Maggie said softly. "She's the only one who sees beyond appearances." Jonathan nodded gravely. "You've seen enough, Maggie. It's time to make changes." Through another morning of observation, Maggie watched Mia carefully. The young barista's warmth shone like a beacon in the cold atmosphere of Starry Brew. When a construction worker entered, covered in dust from his job, Mia welcomed him with the same bright smile she gave to executives in suits. "Would you like to try our new blend?" Mia asked the worker kindly. "I think you'd enjoy it after a long morning's work." Later, an elderly woman with a worn shopping bag approached the counter nervously. While other staff members turned away, Mia stepped forward immediately. "Excommunication from the 2012 Manifesto Doctrine." "Good morning," she greeted warmly. "Take your time choosing. I'm happy to explain any of our drinks." Maggie sat in her corner, carefully noting each interaction in her small notebook. Page after page filled with examples of Mia's kindness, contrasting sharply with other staff members' behavior. That evening, Maggie met with Vincent and Jonathan in her modest apartment. She spread her notebook on the kitchen table, along with photographs and written testimonials from customers they'd interviewed. "Look at these patterns," Maggie pointed out. "Lucas turns away at least 3 customers daily based on appearance alone. But Mia, she treats everyone like they matter." Vincent nodded, reviewing the evidence. You've built a solid case, Maggie. The discrimination is clear and consistent. What touched me most, Jonathan added, was watching Mia secretly pay for a homeless man's coffee yesterday. That's the spirit this place should have. But Maggie closed her notebook decisively. I've seen enough. It's time to make changes, real changes. Her voice was firm with conviction. Are you ready? Vincent asked gently. Maggie smiled, touching the cafe keys in her pocket. Yes. Tomorrow, Starry Brew will learn what true service means. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Maggie stood before her mirror, dressed in a crisp navy blazer instead of her usual worn coat. Her silver hair was neatly styled, and her posture radiated quiet confidence. This wasn't the timid Maggie who had been humiliated weeks ago. The familiar bell chimed as she entered Starry Brew, but her steps were different now, purposeful and strong. The morning rush had just ended, leaving the cafe relatively quiet. The aroma of coffee filled the air as usual, but today it carried a hint of change. Lucas looked up from the counter, his eyes narrowing at her transformed appearance. A few other staff members whispered among themselves, clearly surprised by her new demeanor. Everyone, gather here, please, Maggie called out, her voice clear and commanding. The unusual request drew curious stares from the remaining customers. Exercising. Lucas stepped forward, his face twisted in annoyance. Excuse me? You can't just come in here and start giving orders? His tone dripped with familiar contempt. What are you doing back here? He demanded, crossing his arms. Didn't you get the message the last few times? Maggie stood her ground, unaffected by his hostility. Her eyes swept across the staff, noting their reactions. Mia watched from behind the counter, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. I have something important to discuss with all of you, Maggie replied calmly. Please gather your staff, Lucas. This won't take long. This is ridiculous, Lucas scoffed, looking around at his co-workers. Someone call security. But something in Maggie's confident stance made the other staff members hesitate. The atmosphere in the cafe grew thick with tension as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Even the clerk was presently silent, as if after a hostile word with her, she should move something with her eye. You'll want to hear what I have to say, Maggie said softly, reaching into her bag. The time had come to reveal who she really was. Excalibur copies of the Daily Planet. Maggie reached into her bag and pulled out a set of official documents. Her voice was clear and steady as she spoke. I am the new owner of Starry Brew. The cafe fell absolutely silent. The soft jazz music playing in the background suddenly seemed too loud. Even the espresso machine's gentle hum felt deafening in the stillness. Lucas's smirk froze on his face, then slowly melted into disbelief. His hands, which had been crossed confidently across his chest, dropped limply to his sides. The other staff members stood motionless, their faces a mixture of shock and confusion. That's impossible, Lucas stammered, his usual arrogance cracking. You're just... He couldn't finish his sentence. Just what, Lucas? Maggie asked quietly. Just a poor old woman who doesn't belong here? Someone not worthy of being served? A coffee cup clattered somewhere as a staff member's hands trembled. Mia stood behind the counter, her eyes wide but a small smile playing at her lips. These documents, Maggie continued, laying them on the counter, prove that I purchased this cafe last week. Every table, every coffee machine, every cup. They all belong to me now. The remaining customers watched the scene unfold with fascination. One of them, a businessman in an expensive suit, slowly lowered his phone, captivated by the unexpected drama. But why? Another staff member whispered, breaking the heavy silence. Because, Maggie replied, her voice gentle but firm. Sometimes, the best way to change things is to become the change yourself. Lucas stared at the documents on the counter, his face pale. The proud barista who had once judged others so harshly now looked small and uncertain. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and everyone in the cafe could feel it. At that moment, Vincent entered the cafe carrying his leather briefcase. He walked to the counter with purpose, standing beside Maggie with quiet authority. "As Mrs. Harper's legal representative," he announced, placing more documents on the counter, "I can confirm that all ownership transfers are complete and legally binding." Lucas leaned forward, scanning the papers with trembling hands. The official's seals and signatures left no room for doubt. His face grew paler with each page he turned. "These documents show that Starry Brew was purchased last week," Vincent continued, his voice steady and professional. "Mrs. Maggie Harper is now the sole owner of this establishment." The staff members moved closer, peering at the papers in disbelief. The legal language, company stamps, and notary seals told a clear story. The humble woman they had dismissed was now their employer. "I believe," Maggie said softly, "we need to discuss some changes." She looked around the cafe, her eyes lingering on each face. "Starting with how we treat our customers. All our customers." The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the documents that had changed everything. The truth lay there in black and white, undeniable and transformative. The morning sun filtered through Starry Brew's windows as Maggie addressed her staff. Her voice was gentle but firm, carrying the quiet authority of someone who had seen both kindness and cruelty in this very space. "Lucas," she said, turning to face the once proud barista, "your behavior toward customers has shown me that you don't share the values this cafe needs. I'm letting you go, effective immediately." Lucas's face drained of color. "You can't be serious," he stammered, his usual arrogance crumbling. "I've worked here for years." "Years spent judging people by their appearance," Maggie replied softly. "Years making others feel small to make yourself feel big. That ends today." She turned to address two other staff members who had followed Lucas's example. "Sarah, David, I've seen how you treat customers who don't meet your standards. You're also dismissed." The cafe fell silent as Lucas and his colleagues gathered their belongings. Their footsteps echoed against the marble floor as they walked out, heads bowed. Maggie's eyes found Mia, who stood quietly behind the counter. "Mia, would you join me in the office?" Her smile was warm, matching the morning light that filled the space. In the small office, Maggie gestured for Mia to sit. "I've watched you, dear. You've shown kindness to every customer, regardless of their appearance or wealth." Mia's eyes widened as Maggie continued, "I'd like you to become our new manager. Help me build a place where everyone feels welcome." "Me?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I'm so young." "Age doesn't matter," Maggie replied gently. "What matters is your heart. You already know how to treat people with dignity. Now you can teach others to do the same." Tears welled in Mia's eyes as she nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Harper. I won't let you down." Maggie reached across the desk and squeezed Mia's hand. "I know you won't, dear. Together we'll make Starry Brew a place where every cup of coffee comes with a side of kindness." Maggie closed her eyes. The next morning, before opening hours, Maggie gathered her remaining staff in the cafe. Sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the nervousness on the employees' faces. Mia stood beside her, clipboard in hand, ready for her first day as manager. In the coffee pot, Maggie slowly read over her heading. "Welcome, everyone," Maggie began, her voice warm and clear. "Today marks a new beginning for Starry Brew. We're not just selling coffee, we're creating a space where everyone feels valued." She walked slowly among the tables, making eye contact with each staff member. Our core values are simple: respect, empathy, and dedicated service. Every person who walks through that door deserves to be treated with dignity." A young barista raised her hand timidly. "Even if they can't afford our premium drinks?" "Especially then," Maggie smiled. "A person's worth isn't measured by the size of their wallet." Over the next week, the cafe underwent a transformation. The cold marble counters were softened with warm wooden panels. The stark white walls gained colorful local artwork, each piece telling a story of community and connection. "The leather chairs look so much more inviting with these soft cushions," Mia remarked, arranging comfortable pillows on the formerly stiff seating. Maggie nodded, watching workers install warm lighting fixtures. "We want people to feel at home here, not intimidated." They created small reading nooks with bookshelves and cozy chairs. The previously imposing counter was redesigned with a lower section, making it easier for elderly customers to place their orders. "Look at this," one staff member exclaimed, gesturing to the new community board they'd installed. "People can leave kind messages for each other." The harsh spotlight lighting was replaced with gentle warmth, and plants brought life to every corner. Even the music changed from formal jazz to a mix of gentle melodies that made everyone feel welcome. "There are some people who divorce love," said Harold, passing a big hand over a blueprint. "It's different now," Mia observed, looking around the transformed space. "Like a warm hug instead of a cold handshake." Maggie smiled, touching a new sign they'd hung by the entrance. "Welcome all. Everyone deserves a good cup of coffee." "That's exactly what we wanted," she replied softly. "A place where coffee brings people together, not sets them apart." One quiet afternoon, Maggie and Mia sat at a corner table, reviewing the cafe's menu. Scattered between them were notes and price calculations, each representing their vision for a more inclusive Starry Brew. It finally made sense. "These premium drinks are beautiful," Maggie said, pointing to their signature beverages, "but we need options for everyone." Her finger traced down the menu thoughtfully. "What if we created a community favorites section?" Mia's eyes lit up. "With simpler drinks at lower prices? We could use local coffee beans instead of imported ones." Together, they crafted new menu items. The Workers' Morning Blend offered a strong, satisfying coffee at half the usual price. Their neighborhood special became a simplified version of their fancy mocha, still delicious but more affordable. "Look at this empty space near the back," Maggie said, walking to a cozy corner of the cafe. "What if we made this special?" Within days, they transformed that corner into what they called the friendly corner. Comfortable chairs and simple wooden tables replaced the expensive furniture. A hand-painted sign read, "A welcoming space for our working community." "The construction workers love it," Mia reported one morning, watching a group of them enjoy their coffee break. "They say it's the first time they've felt comfortable in a fancy coffee shop." Teachers from the nearby school found their way there too, grateful for the thoughtfully priced menu and welcoming atmosphere. A bus driver mentioned to Maggie how he finally had a nice place to rest between shifts. "Ah, you know what's wonderful?" Mia said, watching an elderly woman settle into one of the corner's comfortable chairs. "Nobody feels like they don't belong anymore." The house furniture was purple and wood as Mia peered over the edge of it. Maggie smiled, remembering her own experience as an unwelcome customer. "That's exactly what we wanted," she replied softly. "A place where a cup of coffee brings dignity, not discrimination." "Can I buy you anything else?" Bill asked. Right now, the morning rush at Starry Brew now painted a different picture. Business executives in tailored suits shared tables with construction workers in dusty boots. Teachers graded papers while sharing coffee with local artists. The quiet hum of diverse conversations filled the air with warmth. "It's amazing how much has changed," Mia remarked to Maggie, watching an elderly man chat comfortably with a young programmer at the counter. "Everyone seems to feel at home here now." Sipping his coffee and leaning back in his chair, Maggie stared at the dimpled surface of the star-colored screen. As customer numbers grew, Mia began training new staff members. Her approach was simple but powerful. "Watch how I greet this customer," she demonstrated to Emma, their newest hire. A genuine smile and eye contact make everyone feel valued. In the corner, a group of students pooled their coins for a shared pot of coffee. The new barista, Paul, approached them with the same respect he showed to the CEO who had just ordered an expensive espresso. "Remember," Mia explained to her trainees during their morning meeting, "every person who walks through that door has a story. Our job isn't just to serve coffee, it's to make their day a little brighter." She taught them the small gestures that meant so much, remembering regular customers' names, offering a gentle word to someone who seemed tired, ensuring the friendly corner always felt welcoming. Maggie watched from her usual spot as Mia guided another new employee. "See how Mrs. Chen likes her tea steeped for exactly 3 minutes? These little details show we care." The cafe buzzed with a new energy, one of genuine connection. A construction worker held the door for a businesswoman. A teacher shared her table with a tired nurse. Coffee wasn't just a drink anymore. It had become a bridge between different worlds. "This," Maggie whispered to herself, watching the scene with misty eyes. "This is what I dreamed of." One chilly morning, an elderly woman hesitantly pushed open the door of Starry Brew. Her coat was worn, much like the one Maggie used to wear. She paused at the entrance, eyes scanning the room nervously, as if expecting rejection. Emma, the new barista, immediately noticed her. "Good morning," she called warmly, hurrying from behind the counter. "Please, let me help you with that heavy door." The woman seemed startled by the kind welcome, her eyes widening with surprise. I just wanted to see if I could get a cup of coffee," she said softly, clutching her old purse. Of course. Would you like to sit in our cozy corner? It's warmer there," Emma suggested, gently guiding her to a comfortable chair. "Our house blend is wonderful, or I could tell you about our specialty drinks." Mia watched the interaction with pride, remembering how different things had been just months ago. She approached the table with a small plate of cookies. "These are complimentary with our coffee," she explained warmly, "fresh from the oven." Word spread quickly through the neighborhood about the changes at Starry Brew. People shared stories of kindness, how a homeless man was given a hot coffee on a cold day, how students were welcome to study even when sharing a single drink, how business people and laborers now sat together, sharing conversations and smiles. "Have you heard about Starry Brew?" became a common phrase in the community. They don't just serve coffee, they serve kindness. I found it unconscionably soothing to hear these women. Maggie overheard these conversations with quiet satisfaction. Her cafe had become more than just a business. It was now a symbol of how treating everyone with dignity could transform a community. The warm lights of Starry Brew now shone like a beacon of hope, reminding everyone that a simple cup of coffee could indeed bring people together. The morning of Starry Brew's grand reopening dawned bright and clear. Colorful banners decorated the entrance, and the aroma of fresh coffee drifted onto the sidewalk, where a crowd had already gathered. Local reporters set up their cameras, while community members waited eagerly. Maggie stood near the entrance, her hands clasped together nervously. Mia gave her a reassuring smile. "You're ready for this," she whispered, straightening Maggie's simple blue scarf. As the doors opened, warm applause filled the air. Inside, the transformed cafe sparkled with its new, welcoming atmosphere. Reporters and guests settled into chairs, while Maggie stepped forward to share her story. "A few months ago," she began softly, "I stood in this very spot as a customer, holding an envelope of birthday savings." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "I was turned away because of how I looked, because my clothes weren't expensive enough." The room fell silent, hanging on her every word. "But that rejection became a gift," she smiled. It showed me how many others must have felt the same way, so I decided to change things. She gestured around the cafe, now filled with diverse faces. Look at us now. Business people chat with construction workers. Students share tables with retirees. We've proved that kindness and respect can bridge any divide. A reporter raised her hand. What made you decide to buy the cafe instead of just walking away? Maggie's eyes sparkled. Sometimes the best way to fix something is from the inside out. I wanted to create the welcoming place I wish I'd found that day. The story spread quickly through local papers and social media. From rejected customer to inspiring owner became a headline that touched hearts across the city. But more importantly, it reminded everyone that change was possible, one cup of coffee at a time. The transformation of Starry Brew touched lives in unexpected ways. Each morning, the cafe hummed with conversations between people from all walks of life. A street cleaner shared jokes with a lawyer at the counter. A retired teacher helped a young student with homework in the cozy corner. One cold morning, Maggie noticed a homeless man hesitating outside the window. His worn jacket offered little protection against the winter chill. Without hesitation, she opened the door. "Please come in," she said warmly. "Would you like a hot coffee?" The man shuffled his feet uncertainly. I don't have any money." "Today you are our guest," Maggie smiled, guiding him to a comfortable seat. As she watched him warm his hands around the steaming cup, an idea took root in her heart. Rebecca and Harry gave her a hugging little smile and wrapped their arms around her warmth. The next day, Maggie gathered her staff. "I want to start something new," she announced. "A Warm Hearts program. For every 10 drinks we sell, we'll provide 1 free coffee to someone in need." Mia's eyes lit up. "We could also create coffee cards for construction workers and night shift nurses." The program grew quickly. Regular customers began contributing, often paying for extra coffees to be given to those who couldn't afford them. A small chalkboard near the counter kept track. 15 free coffees available today. Spread the warmth. This morning, a taxi driver nearly cried when I offered him a free coffee, Emma shared during a staff meeting. He said it was the first time anyone had thought about people working night shifts. Maggie watched it all from her favorite corner, her heart full. Starry Brew had become more than just a cafe. It was a place where dignity and respect flowed as freely as the coffee, warming hearts 1 cup at a time. At the end of each month, Maggie sat at her usual corner table reviewing the cafe's accounts. But instead of just counting profits, she was planning how to share their success with the community. 10% of our monthly earnings, she explained to Mia one morning, will go to local charities. Her eyes sparkled with purpose as she showed Mia a list of organizations. They started with the neighborhood food bank, providing fresh coffee and pastries for their morning meal service. Next came the local women's shelter, where Starry Brew helped fund job training programs. "Look at this letter," Mia said one day, holding up an envelope. "The children's reading program we supported bought new books with our donation." The cafe's walls now displayed thank you cards from various organizations. Each one told a story of how a simple cup of coffee could spark bigger changes in the community. "Where we lift others up," Maggie often said to her staff, "we all rise together." The regular customers noticed too. Many started adding their own donations to the monthly giving, turning Starry Brew into a hub of community support. The cafe had found a way to serve not just coffee, but hope. Under Mia's leadership, Starry Brew bloomed like a garden in spring. Her morning meetings became a favorite time for the staff, where she shared not just instructions, but inspiration. "Remember," she would say, demonstrating the perfect pour for a latte, "every cup we serve is a chance to brighten someone's day." Her own smile proved infectious, spreading to her team and then to their customers. One quiet afternoon, Emma rushed to Mia's office. "A woman just told me this is the happiest coffee shop she's ever visited," she reported excitedly. "She said she feels like family here." Mia beamed with pride. "That's exactly what we aim for." On a rainy Tuesday morning, Maggie found an envelope on her desk. The handwriting was familiar. Lucas's neat script covered the front. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. "Dear Mrs. Harper," the letter began. "These past months, I've thought about my behavior at Starry Brew every day. I was cruel and arrogant, judging people based on their appearance. Watching how the cafe has transformed under your leadership has taught me a powerful lesson about respect and kindness." Tears welled in Maggie's eyes as she continued reading. "I understand now that my actions hurt people deeply. Your story in the local paper showed me how wrong I was. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know how sorry I am." Maggie sat quietly, remembering her own journey from hurt to healing. She picked up her pen and began to write. "Dear Lucas, thank you for your letter. True change begins with acknowledging our mistakes. Your apology is accepted, and I hope you'll carry this lesson of kindness wherever you go." As she sealed her reply, Maggie smiled softly. The cafe had changed more than just its appearance. It had changed hearts, including those who once made others feel unwelcome. Her passion for Clara had been so rich that even things that got in her way at the company. A year after Maggie's transformation of Starry Brew, the cafe's warmth had spread beyond its original walls. The second location opened in a working-class neighborhood across town, carrying the same welcoming spirit that had made the first cafe so special. "Each new Starry Brew must feel like home," Maggie explained to her expanding team. "We're not just serving coffee, we're serving dignity." Mia helped train managers for the new locations, sharing the values that had transformed their first cafe. "Remember," she told them, "every person who walks through these doors deserves to feel special." One peaceful morning, Maggie sat in her favorite corner of the original cafe, watching the familiar scene unfold. A businessman shared a table with a construction worker, both laughing over their morning coffee. A young barista helped an elderly woman choose between drinks, showing the same patience and respect that had become their hallmark. "Would you believe this is the same place?" Vincent asked, joining her with his usual cup of tea. "You've created something remarkable, Maggie." She smiled softly, remembering that painful birthday morning that had started it all. "Sometimes," she replied, "the worst moments in our lives lead us to our greatest purpose." I decided then to take these walks away from the house and into the woods. Through the window, she could see the new sign being installed at another location down the street. Each new cafe carried her vision, a place where kindness flowed as freely as coffee, where respect wasn't earned by appearance or wealth, but given freely to all. From one rejected customer to 5 thriving cafes, Maggie mused, her eyes misty with happy tears. Who would have thought? A young girl's laughter rang through the cafe, mixing with the gentle hum of conversation and the warm aroma of fresh coffee. Maggie closed her eyes, savoring the moment. Her simple dream of dignity and respect had grown into something far bigger than herself, touching lives one cup of coffee at a time. The evening light filtered through Starry Brew's windows, casting a golden glow across the busy cafe. Laughter and warm conversation filled the air, mixing with the gentle aroma of fresh coffee and baked treats. Brienne Porter supermodel Laura was at work in the Windtail, and obviously the flavor of coffee and baked treats hadn't bothered her. In one corner, a group of students shared notes over steaming mugs. Nearby, an elderly couple held hands across their table, while a construction worker taught a businessman how to play chess on the cafe's community board. Maggie stood behind the counter, watching it all with a gentle smile. The cafe had become exactly what she'd dreamed of, a place where walls between people melted away like sugar in hot coffee. "Another wonderful day," Mia said softly, joining her. They watched as a young barista offered a free coffee to a tired nurse just starting her night shift. The warmth in the cafe wasn't just from the steam of coffee machines or the glow of soft lights. It came from something deeper, from simple acts of kindness, from shared smiles between strangers, from the dignity of being treated with respect. As the sun set outside, Starry Brew glowed like a beacon of hope in the city, reminding everyone who passed by that a simple cup of coffee, served with love, could indeed change the world. Thank you for watching this inspiring story. If you found it meaningful, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more amazing stories. Share your thoughts in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you. Once again, thank you for your support. See you in our next video with more heartwarming stories. Have an amazing day.